everybody, it's Mandy from Trouble Forge. So I've talked before about how I try to like batch bake on the weekends. Bud and Matt have both been home the last couple weeks. So we're going through bread a little bit faster. I had made a dozen rolls and 3 loaves of bread on Saturday. It's almost Thursday. So we ran out, and like I've said before, we don't have to have bread on hand, but I'm in the kitchen today working on bagging soap, so it's a good time for me to do something that is fairly easy, like making bread. So I used to use Ruth Ann Zimmerman's recipe, and it was fine. I liked it, but then I watched Meg at Holler Homestead make bread, and I was like, oh, we should try this. So I have an excessive amount of eggs at the moment because we've been sharing with a friend down the road. And I was like, let's try Meg's recipe. This was a couple months ago. Let's try Meg's recipe. And we really, really like it. It definitely has that like Amish feel. So I grew up in Lancaster County, which is like the Amishest place on earth, I think. And like when I was a kid, my parents, my grandparents, whatever, would buy bread at the Amish store or the Amish bakery, whatever. And it was so good. Like it's tall, it's fluffy, it's delicious. So I have to give credit to Meg. This is definitely Meg's recipe. She makes 6 loaves at a time. She has a Bosch mixer, so I think she can do it all at once. I just have my heavy duty KitchenAid mixer for now. I haven't upgraded to any bigger mixer at this point. Now, certainly you could double what I'm gonna do. Make the 6 loaf recipe or 10 or whatever you need to do to feed your family and do it by hand. But because I have surfaces covered with laptop and coffee and soap and whatever, I'm just gonna do it in the mixer. And this is honestly what I typically do. It's really just a lot easier. I can proof the yeast that sits for 10 minutes. I can throw the ingredients in, it kneads it. When the KitchenAid's kind of done its thing, I'll pull it out, give it a few good kneads, split it up, and we move on. So as always, I will put the recipe in the description, but we are gonna start, and like I said, this will make 3 loaves. So, and you could, what I've done before, like I said, is like if you make the 3 loaf recipe, you could do 2 loaves and a dozen rolls. You could make like a French loaf, like make a long skinny loaf. You could do breadsticks with this. I mean, endless possibilities that you could do with this recipe. So to do 3 loaves, you're gonna start with 1.5 tablespoons of yeast, 3 cups of water, a scoop of honey, let it sit in your bowl for 10 minutes. So when I do this, what I do is I just throw that in my bowl. I set a timer for 10 minutes. Sometimes it goes longer than that. And as long as everything is bubbly and looks good, then we move on to the next step. So that's step 1. Put those 3 ingredients into your mixer, set a timer for 10 minutes, let it sit. Note, I'm using instant yeast. I know there's like Rapid Rise and like all these other fancy things. I buy instant yeast in bulk, like in the little foil packs or whatever. We do love sourdough, and I worked really hard this winter trying to master sourdough, and I finally got it down. But frankly, we kind of just got, I don't know, sourdough'd out, I guess. And I guess, maybe this sounds silly, but like yeast bread feels a little more like summery. It's a little less like committal. Sourdough, in my opinion, is an awesome fall and winter. It's a good fall and winter thing because the process is longer, for 1. And for 2, you know, in my opinion, like it's a crustier bread. So you're having like a heavy toast with dinner, or like you're dipping it in soup or something like that. And we don't tend to have like super heavy meals in the summer. We usually have a pretty hearty breakfast, and then usually a light dinner because everybody's been working all day. We're hot, you know, we're hungry, but we're not like, let's have a huge heavy meal or just hot soup or anything like that. And it's warm today. Like it's in the low 80s, I think, but it's muggy as crap. So I'm just gonna stick with yeast bread. We can make sandwiches with it. We can do toast with breakfast, that kind of thing. So I am not like anti-sourdough. We didn't ditch sourdough. We're just changing it up because I'm always super honest about these things. I buy those big packs. I have a bunch of those big packs in my pantry because if things are bad, we could continue to make bread as long as we have flour. I always put it in like a jar like this when I pull it out of those. I can't remember if that pack fills this or not. I don't remember. It's those big like ones you get like overwrapped at Sam's or Costco or BJ's or wherever you go for that kind of stuff. This has probably been in here for 3 years. Because I wasn't making bread really until this past winter when I decided I was going to learn how to bake better and learned how to make yeast bread and sourdough bread and all these kinds of things. And so I am almost sure that yeast is probably 3 years old. So as usual, I'm here to tell you that I don't follow the rules. If it's making really good bread, I'm not throwing it away just because it's however old it is that I don't even know. So if you have old yeast, try it. If it's bubbly when you put the water and whatever sweetener, now you could use sugar or whatever. I'm gonna use honey. You could use maple syrup or whatever you want. If it's bubbly, it's probably fine. All right, so when I say a big scoop of honey, something like that. You don't really need to measure. It's like a heaping tablespoon. Whatever you do, it'll be fine. So we buy our honey from a kid down the road. He does an amazing job. This is wildflower honey. This is a 12 pounds in a gallon container. It's the best. Honey never goes bad, in case you didn't know. If it gets crystallized, you can still use it. You can melt it back down, just don't make it too hot. So in here, we have our 1.5 tablespoons of yeast, 3 cups of warm water, big scoop of honey. I'm gonna set a timer for 10 minutes and let it go. Frankly, it's probably gonna be longer than that because I'm gonna get caught up bagging soap. I know me. Keep the water in the sink too. And then we'll get back to it. All right, so you can see that we have good bubbles. It's easily been 20 minutes. I don't even know. I forgot to set a timer because I got sidetracked with something else. So it's bubbly, looks good. We're gonna move on to the next step. All right, so we are going to do a tablespoon of salt, 3 eggs, and about 7 to 8 cups of flour. This is where, you know, practicing making bread really comes into play. A lot of people say, like, what's your recipe for this or whatever? And bread is one of those things that, like, you can follow the recipe, but until you get a feel for what the dough should feel like and whatever, you know, there's a lot of things that can alter it. The type of flour you're using, the type of salt that you're using, what the temp is in your house, what the humidity is, how you're kneading it, the warmth of your hands. I mean, there's just so many things that affect it that, you know, having a base recipe is great, but you're definitely going to need to start to get familiar with how the dough should feel. And it's not that if this is the first time you're making it, you'll probably make something that is edible. It just might not be as fluffy or risen or any of those things that you might be used to. So I have my salt and my eggs in my KitchenAid bowl. We're gonna go into the short-term pantry. I've shown this before. I have a video on Zad building these shelves and all of that. I can link that below. I keep a barrel of bread flour in here because I just go for it so often. It just makes sense to just have the barrel in here instead of shuffling to the large pantry all the time. So I'm gonna start with like 7.5 cups of flour, and then we'll just see where we're at. If you have been following for a while, you know that I don't like nonsense. I don't like wasted time. I don't like extra complicated steps. It's just not my thing. So I keep a 1/2 cup in here. I'd probably put a cup in here, but I only have 2 1-cups in my thing, and I feel like they're constantly in use. So I had a spare 1/2 cup. So I leave that in here. My water glass bucket makes a nice table for my bowl, so I can just scoop everything in here. Minimal mess. It's great. I often feel like this guard is very silly, and I don't use it all the time, but when I have flour that's like a little bit high, I do because it's just less to clean up. So this is at 7-ish. You know, I loosely measured. This is still pretty wet. Obviously, that is not the consistency we're going for, way too sticky. So I'm probably gonna add 1 more cup. And this is what I'm talking about. The more you bake bread or anything like this, you kind of get a feel for what it needs to look like. You know, if it's sticky like this and it's gonna stick to your hands, that's not what we're going for. All right, so I let this go in the mixer for, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes or so. Sometimes you have this problem where even if you have this, there's like a guard you can get for the dough hook, but like it'll get on top of it. I just try to like pull it down. It's not a big deal. So we're gonna drop the bowl. This is a little bit sticky, but I have some bits in the bottom that's real shaggy, and probably till I mix it together, it's gonna be fine. So I'm gonna pull this out of the bowl, get it on the counter, get it all kneaded up. All right, so it's amazing how quickly this bread rises. So Zuzu pooped and is knocking dishes everywhere, and I had to get the trash to the road because it's like thunderstorming, and they come tomorrow, and I had to make sure that I got it out there, at least before dark. It's just easier. Anywho, so this had risen a good bit, which is fine. It's sort of like gives you an opportunity to knead it again. This is completely not a necessary step, but if you have a poop crisis or any of these other things, it'll be totally fine. You can keep working with it. So my bread cutter, if you watched my video from yesterday, I made Play-Doh with the kids, and then I have 2 of these, so I always let them use them for Play-Doh. So went and found this, washed it. We're gonna cut this into 3 pieces, and then I'm gonna put them in my bread pans. All right, if you're super new to bread baking and you wanna try to get these as even as possible, you can bust out the old scale. I try to, they don't have to be exact, but you know, try to get them as close as you can. And then you can get them in your bread pans. Make sure you grease your bread pans. I grease mine with lard. You could use butter, tallow, bacon fat, whatever you have that's gonna make it not stick. Mine are approximately all 800. I don't typically weigh them. I normally just gas and it's fine. You're gonna, well, at least I test the internal temperature anyway. So if one just takes a little longer, you just leave it in there. If you want to weigh them, that's totally up to you. If you have an eager little helper, you can give them a little piece and they can make all their own little, it's perfect while you try to get the bread in the pans. So I got these all greased. This one is a little smaller. I don't have 3 metal ones. This one is a little smaller. It tends to get a bigger like loafy dome on it, but it all tastes great. So we are just gonna kind of shape these. Again, I don't get super picky about this. Just shape it and put it in your pan. Again, if you're new to this, it should be like elasticy, not super sticky. I kind of just like bring all the seams to the bottom. That works just fine. So you want to let these rise somewhere warm. In the winter, I put them on the wood stove. This time of year, even with the air on, it's pretty warm. So these should rise. You might get a good rise in an hour. If it's a little cooler, maybe like 2 hours. Bud makes, my 14-year-old makes these gigantic beeswax wraps. Don't like this like dried on dough. Obviously, if you order one, it'll be nice and fresh and clean. So I will drop our link for that below at chapelforge.com. You can order these. This is the huge one that he makes for sheet pans. He makes them in 10 by 10 and then to also cover a 9 by 13. These are amazing for this. Obviously, if you don't have a beeswax wrap, a flour sack towel, a dish towel, a bath towel, whatever it is that you have will work. I find that unlike sourdough, where it's sitting for a while, so you kind of want something that's a little tighter fitting, I don't even bother to like scoot this underneath and get it all suctioned to it. It's only going to sit it for an hour or two. It's not really going to develop a crust, so this should be fine. So we're going to let this cover, and in, I say 2 hours / whenever I'm remember to do it, we're going to come back and finish this. All right, so it's probably been 2 or so hours. I was bagging soap and I had 1 more batch to go and the printer's acting up. So I give up and we'll deal with that tomorrow. All right, this looks really good. You could certainly let it rise more if you'd like to. I love the way it rises in the glass pan. That's the best. But nonetheless, you're gonna preheat your oven to 375 and then we'll get them thrown in here soon. When your oven is preheated to 375, you're gonna bake it for 20 minutes or until it's like 195 to 205. I usually shoot for around 200. All right, so all of these are, I just have like a basic $12 thermometer from Amazon. They're all like 198, 201, something like that. So I'm happy with these. So we're gonna pull these out and let them cool. All right, so these look beautiful. I'm gonna put some butter on them. This is kind of optional, but everything tastes better with butter. So, gonna put some butter on these, gonna pull these out. It is like 10 o'clock and I am tired and I need a shower. So, I'm gonna pull these out before I head upstairs. They'll be cool in the morning and then we'll store them and that'll be that. So, if you have questions about how to do this, I promise it takes a little bit of practice, but it'll be so much better, so much cheaper. You can make these for like $1.25 a loaf, depending on where you're at. $1.25, $1.50, something like that. Even probably if you use like wheat or some more expensive flour or something, it would probably still be about that same price. So if you have questions about how to do this, let me know. We'll see you next time.